Welcome to the family. If you enjoy powerful stories and wild adventures, subscribe now, hit like and share with someone who will love it too. Commander Vela of the Altarian fleet stood at the bridge's viewport, her crystalline skin reflecting the harsh light of the dying star system. The evacuation of the mining colony on Kepler 442c was proceeding slower than anticipated, and her patience was wearing thin. The human advisor assigned to her ship, Captain Jake Morrison, had been nothing but a source of irritation since he'd arrived 3 days ago. "Commander." Jake's voice carried that peculiar human inflection she'd grown to despise. Calm, measured, annoyingly confident. "I strongly recommend we extend the evacuation timeline by another 48 hours. My analysis of the solar data suggests—" "Your analysis is unnecessary," Vela interrupted, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her species' authority. The bridge crew of mixed alien species turned their attention toward the exchange. "We have our own stellar physicists, human. The Altarian Science Council has determined we have 18 hours before the star's collapse affects the planet's orbit." Jake stepped closer to her command chair, his brown eyes meeting her multifaceted ones without flinching. Most species found direct eye contact with an Altarian unsettling, but humans seemed immune to such discomfort. "With respect, Commander, I've analyzed 17 similar stellar collapses in my career. The preliminary gravitational waves we're detecting suggest the collapse will accelerate exponentially. If we don't evacuate everyone within the next 6 hours, we may not get them out at all." The bridge fell silent. Vela's secondary arms flexed, in irritation, a gesture that would have sent most aliens scrambling for cover. Jake remained unmoved, his stance relaxed but attentive. "The human thinks he knows better than our scientists," Vela announced to her crew, her voice dripping with disdain. Several of her officers, Keth, her tactical officer, and Mira, her communications specialist, exchanged glances. They'd worked with humans before and knew better than to dismiss their warnings outright. Jake pulled out a small data pad and extended it toward her. "The gravitational resonance patterns are here. I'm not questioning your scientists' competence, but I am questioning whether they've accounted for the unique mineral composition of this planet. The heavy metals in the core will amplify the gravitational effects." Vela's crest flared, a clear sign of agitation among her people. "Humans always believe they possess superior knowledge. Your species has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. My people have been exploring the cosmos for over 3 millennia. Sometimes fresh eyes see patterns that experience might miss," Jake replied quietly. "I'm not trying to undermine your authority, Commander. I'm trying to save lives." The tension on the bridge was palpable. Vela's crew watched the exchange, many of them thinking of the 12,000 colonists still on the planet's surface. The evacuation ships were working at maximum capacity, but they were still transporting civilians from the remote mining installations scattered across the continent. "Your recommendation is noted and rejected," Vela declared firmly. "We proceed. According to the established timeline, 18 hours is more than sufficient." Jake nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I hope you're right, Commander, for everyone's sake." As he turned to leave the bridge, Vela felt a strange unease settle in her stomach. Something about the human's quiet acceptance bothered her more than his initial persistence had. But she pushed the feeling aside. She was an Altarian commander with centuries of experience. She would not be swayed by the fears of a young human who had probably never even seen a stellar collapse outside of simulations. The evacuation continued according to schedule, but Jake's words echoed in her mind as she watched the dying star pulse ominously in the distance. 8 hours into the evacuation, the first anomaly appeared on the sensors. Lieutenant Keth, Vela's tactical officer, frowned at his display before calling out to the commander. "Ma'am, we're detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations from the star. The pattern is irregular." Vela moved from her command chair to examine the readings herself. The data showed gravitational waves pulsing outward from the dying star, but their frequency was increasing faster than the Altarian models had predicted. A cold realization began to creep up her spine. "Where is the human advisor?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Captain Morrison is in Cargo Bay 7, assisting with refugee processing," Mira reported. "Should I summon him?" Vela hesitated. Calling Jake back to the bridge would be tantamount to admitting she might have been wrong. Her pride, deeply ingrained in Altarian culture, rebelled against the notion. No. Increase our monitoring of the stellar readings. Alert me if there are any significant changes. But the changes came swiftly. Within the next 2 hours, the gravitational pulses had doubled. In frequency, the evacuation shuttles reported difficulty maintaining stable flight paths as spacetime itself seemed to fluctuate around the dying star. In Cargo Bay 7, Jake worked alongside the refugee processing teams, helping families navigate the chaotic boarding procedures. Despite his concerns about the timeline, he threw himself into the humanitarian effort. A young Tyrillian child, no more than 6 years old by their species development, clung to his leg while her parents completed their documentation. "It's okay, little one," he said softly, his translator rendering the words in her native tongue. "We're going to get you somewhere safe." That's when his communicator chirped with an emergency signal. The message was brief and chilling. Gravitational. Anomalies detected. Evacuation timeline accelerated. Jake gently extracted himself from the child's grip and made his way to the nearest observation port. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum, he could see the star in the distance. It was no longer the steady, dying ember it had been hours before. Now, it pulsed with an angry red light, and even at this distance, he could feel the subtle vibrations through the ship's hull. He activated his communicator. "Morrison to bridge. Commander, are you seeing the gravitational resonance cascade?" Vela's voice crackled back, tight with barely controlled anxiety. "The situation is under control, Captain. Continue with your assigned duties." But Jake could hear the tension beneath her words. He also heard something else in the background. Urgent conversations in Altarian, voices raised in what sounded like disagreement. The professional crew that had seemed so confident earlier was beginning to crack under the pressure of an accelerating disaster. On the planet's surface, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The mining installations reported equipment failures, as gravitational fields fluctuated wildly. Transportation vehicles struggled to maintain stability, and several evacuation shuttles had been forced to abort their landing approaches. Chief Mining Engineer Roberts, one of the few humans among the colonists, sent an urgent message to the fleet. "The ground-based gravity generators are failing. If we don't get the remaining 6,000 people off planet within the next 4 hours, the shuttles won't be able to land safely." Vela received the message and felt her confidence finally begin to waver. The humans' timeline was looking more accurate by the hour, but she had already committed to the Altarian Science Council's projections. Changing course now would not only humiliate her personally, but could be seen as a rejection of her people's scientific authority. Her first officer, a seasoned Altarian named Dex, approached her command chair. "Commander, perhaps we should consider the human's earlier recommendation. The data is starting to support his analysis." Vela's crest flattened against her skull, a sign of stress among her people. "We cannot simply abandon our own scientific models based on panic," she replied, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. But even as she spoke, another alarm sounded. The star's collapse was accelerating beyond all predictions, and time was running out faster than anyone had imagined. The painful price of her refusal to listen was about to become clear to everyone aboard. The 13th hour brought catastrophe. The star's gravitational field collapsed inward, with such violence that it sent shockwaves rippling through space-time itself. On the bridge of Vela's flagship, the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending crew members stumbling and causing equipment to spark and fail. "All shuttles abort landing procedures immediately," Vela commanded into her communicator, but the response she received chilled her to her core. "Commander, this is Shuttle 7, came the panicked voice of Pilot Nam, a veteran Altarian with over 50 years of flight experience. "I can't pull up. The gravitational field is too strong. It's pulling us toward the planet's surface." Through the bridge's main viewer, Vela watched in horror as 3 evacuation shuttles, each carrying over 200 refugees, struggled against the invisible force dragging them downward. The planet's gravity had increased by nearly 30% in the last hour, making orbital escape increasingly difficult. Jake Morrison appeared on the bridge without being summoned, his face grim but determined. "Commander, we need to reconfigure the tractor beam arrays to create a gravitational counterfield. It's the only way to help those shuttles break free." Vela spun toward him, her crystalline features reflecting the red emergency lighting. This is your fault. Your constant warnings created panic and disrupted our carefully planned operation." "My warnings were accurate," Jake replied steadily, moving to an auxiliary console. "Right now that doesn't matter. What matters is saving those people. Lieutenant Keth, can you reroute power from the weapons systems to the tractor beam array?" Keth looked between Jake and his commander, uncertainty written across his reptilian features. The Altarian military hierarchy was strict, but he had worked with humans before and respected their problem-solving abilities. "Commander?" Keth asked, awaiting orders. Vela felt the weight of command crushing down on her like the gravitational forces below. Her pride warred with the reality of the situation. 3 shuttles full of innocent civilians were about to crash, and the human might be their only hope of salvation. "Do it," she whispered, then louder. "Do it. All available power to tractor beam systems." Jake's fingers flew over the console, interfacing with the ship's systems through his neural implant, a technology that still amazed most alien species. "I'm creating a series of gravitational nodes between us and the shuttles. It won't lift them, but it should give their engines enough assistance to break free." The next few minutes were agonizing. On the planet's surface, Chief Roberts watched, from the main evacuation center, as the sky above churned with unnatural colors. The dying star's light was bending and twisting as space-time warped around it. "All remaining personnel, emergency evacuation protocol," Roberts shouted into his communicator. "Anyone who isn't on a shuttle in the next hour isn't getting off this rock." But many of the mining installations were hours away from the main evacuation site, and the ground transportation was failing as gravity fluctuated. Thousands of people were stranded in remote locations, unable to reach the shuttles that could save them. Above, Jake's impromptu gravitational assistance was working. One by one, the 3 trapped shuttles fought free of the planet's enhanced gravity well and began their ascent toward the fleet. But the effort had drained the ship's power reserves, leaving them unable to assist any further evacuation attempts. "Shuttle 7 clear," Nam's voice crackled through the comm system. "All souls aboard accounted for, thank you, Commander. And thank you, Captain Morrison." Vela felt a mixture of relief and shame wash over her. The human's quick thinking had saved 600 lives, but how many more were still trapped on the planet's surface? "Status report," she commanded. Mira consulted. Her communications array. 4,000 civilians successfully evacuated, approximately 8,000 still planetside, scattered across 17 mining installations. Current gravitational conditions are preventing further shuttle operations. The numbers hit Vela like a physical blow. 8,000 people, men, women, children of a dozen different species, were trapped on a planet that was about to be torn apart by gravitational forces. And it was her fault. Her refusal to listen to Jake's warnings had cost precious hours that could have been used for evacuation. Jake turned from his console, his expression somber. "Commander, there might be another option. It's dangerous, and it goes against every safety protocol in the book, but it could work." Vela met his gaze, seeing no judgment there despite everything that had happened. "What do you propose?" "We use the fleet's combined engine output to create a localized space-time distortion. Essentially, we create a bubble of stable gravity around the planet for just long enough to get the remaining shuttles in and out." Dex, her first officer, stepped forward. "The power requirements would be enormous. We'd have to link all 6 ships in the fleet and coordinate their engine outputs perfectly. One mistake and we could tear apart our own vessels." Jake nodded grimly. "That's why it's dangerous, but right now it's the only chance those 8,000 people have." Vela looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew, some Altarian, some from other species, all of them waiting for her decision. The weight of command had never felt heavier, and the painful consequences of her earlier choices were becoming clearer by the moment. The coordinated effort to save the remaining colonists required a level of inter-ship cooperation that the Altarian fleet had never attempted. Vela found herself relying entirely on Jake's expertise as he worked to synchronize the engine outputs of 6 different vessels, each with its own unique propulsion system and power grid. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly, as he hunched over, "the fleet communications console, I owe you an apology." Jake didn't look up from his work, his fingers dancing across holographic displays as he calculated power distributions. "Apologies can wait, Commander. Right now I need to know if your engineers can maintain a sustained power output at 112% of normal capacity for at least 40 minutes. Vela turned to her chief engineer. "Grix, can our systems handle that kind of stress?" Insectoid engineer's compound eyes reflected the console lights as he considered the question. "Theoretically, yes, but we risk cascade failures in the primary power grid. If we lose containment on the antimatter reactor, the ship would be vaporized," Jake finished. "I know, but if we don't try, 8,000 people die for certain." The brutal mathematics of the situation settled over the bridge crew like a suffocating blanket. They could save the colonists, but only by risking their own lives and the lives of the 4,000 refugees already aboard their ships. On the planet's surface, Chief Roberts was coordinating the final evacuation efforts from the primary mining facility. The gravitational distortions were getting worse by the hour, and several of the smaller outposts had gone silent. Whether they had been destroyed by the shifting gravity fields or simply lost communication, no one knew. "Roberts to Fleet Command," he transmitted. "We've managed to consolidate most of the remaining personnel into 7 locations, but the gravity fluctuations are making it impossible for shuttles to maintain stable approach vectors." Vela activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is Commander Vela. We are about to attempt a fleet-wide engine synchronization to create a temporary gravitational stabilization field around the planet. This is an extremely dangerous procedure that has never been attempted before. All non-essential personnel should report to emergency stations immediately." Throughout the 6 ships of the fleet, aliens of dozens of species prepared for what might be their final moments. In the refugee holds, families huddled together, not understanding the technical details but sensing the gravity of the situation from the crew's behavior. Jake had established communication links with the engineering teams on all 6 vessels. The coordination required split-second timing and perfect execution. Even a microsecond delay in engine firing could create destructive interference patterns that would tear the ships apart. "Fleet coordination test in 30 seconds, Jake announced. "All vessels prepare for synchronized engine pulse on my mark." Vela watched the human work with growing admiration and regret. His calm professionalism under impossible pressure was exactly what her crew needed, and she had nearly dismissed him. Entirely. The painful consequences of her prejudice were becoming clearer with each passing moment. "Mark," Jake called out. 6 starships fired their engines in perfect unison, creating a web of gravitational forces around the dying planet. For a brief, shining moment, the chaotic gravity field stabilized. Sensors across the fleet registered normal. Gravitational readings planetside for the first time in hours. "It's working," Mira called out from her communication station. "Gravity readings are stable across all 7 evacuation sites." But the effort was taking its toll on the ships. Warning lights flashed across every bridge as power systems strained beyond their design limits. On Vela's flagship, the main reactor, temperature climbed steadily toward critical levels. "All shuttles, immediate launch authorization," Vela commanded. "You have approximately 35 minutes of stable gravity. After that, we cannot guarantee safe passage." 12 evacuation shuttles launched simultaneously from the fleet, racing toward the planet's surface in a desperate bid to save the remaining colonists. Each shuttle could carry approximately 300 refugees, meaning they would need to make at least 3 trips to evacuate everyone. Jake monitored the engine synchronization, making constant micro-adjustments to maintain the gravitational field. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he balanced the power outputs of 6 different propulsion systems, each one fighting against the natural forces trying to tear the planet apart. "First wave of shuttles approaching surface," reported Keth from the tactical station. "They're reporting stable approach vectors, But maintaining the gravitational field was proving more difficult than anticipated. The dying star's collapse was accelerating, and it was taking increasingly more power to counteract its effects. Vela could see the strain on Jake's face as he pushed the fleet's engines beyond their safe operating parameters. "Captain Morrison," she said, "how long can we maintain this field?" Jake's response was grim. "At current power consumption rates, maybe 20 more minutes before we start losing ships to reactor overload. And that's if we're lucky. 20 minutes to evacuate 8,000 people." The mathematics were becoming impossible, and the painful price of Vela's earlier decisions was about to claim lives she could have saved. 17 minutes into the gravitational stabilization effort, disaster struck. The Altarian cruiser Nexus reported a cascade failure in its primary power grid. Chief Engineer Warwick's panicked voice crackled through the fleet communications. "We're losing antimatter containment. Reactor temperature critical." Jake's hands flew over his console, instantly recalculating power distributions to compensate for the loss of one ship's engine output. "Commander Vela, order the Nexus to withdraw immediately. If they stay in formation, their reactor breach could take out 2 more ships." Vela didn't hesitate. "Nexus, break formation and retreat to minimum safe distance. Emergency power to evacuation procedures." But losing one ship's gravitational contribution meant the remaining 5 vessels had to increase their output even further. Warning klaxons wailed throughout the fleet as reactor temperatures climbed toward critical levels on every remaining ship. On the planet's surface, the first shuttle wave had landed successfully and was loading refugees as quickly as possible. Chief Roberts coordinated the evacuation from the main mining facility, where over 2,000 people waited their turn for salvation. "Shuttle crews, we need maximum capacity loading," Roberts transmitted. "Forget comfort protocols. Pack them. In like cargo if you have to. Lives matter more than regulations right now." The shuttles were designed to carry 300 passengers in standard configuration, but the crews were managing to fit nearly 400 by utilizing every available space. Cargo holds, maintenance corridors, even the shuttle's small medical bays were pressed into service as passenger compartments. But even with the increased capacity, the mathematics remained brutal. 12 shuttles, 400 passengers each, 3 trips required. That was still only 400 evacuation slots for 8,000 people. Under normal circumstances, it would have been more than adequate, but normal circumstances allowed for multiple trips over several days, not a desperate race against time and physics. Jake's neural implant was processing vast amounts of data as he struggled to maintain the gravitational field with diminishing resources. His human brain, enhanced by technology, was performing calculations that would have required a supercomputer under normal circumstances. But the strain was enormous, and Vela could see him beginning to falter. "Captain Morrison, can you maintain the field long enough for 3 complete shuttle rotations?" she asked. Jake's response was honest and terrifying. "Unknown, Commander. We're operating beyond all safety parameters. I can guarantee maybe 10 more minutes of stable field generation. After that..." He gestured helplessly at the displays showing reactor temperatures across the fleet. 10 minutes. The first shuttle wave was still loading passengers planetside. Even if they completed their loading immediately and launched at maximum burn, they would need at least 6 minutes to reach the I fleet. That left only 4 minutes for the second wave to land, load and launch, an impossible time frame. Vela made a decision that went against every protocol in the Altarian military handbook. All shuttles, continuous rotation pattern, don't wait. For complete loading, launch with whatever passengers you have and immediately begin approach for the next wave. We'll keep cycling until everyone is off planet or we lose the gravitational field. It was a desperate gambit that maximized the number of evacuation runs while accepting that each shuttle would carry fewer passengers per trip. The mathematics were still challenging, but it gave them their best chance of saving the maximum number of lives. On the bridge, Dex monitored the fleet's status. "Commander, the Stellar Wind is reporting stress fractures in their engine housing. The Quantum Dawn has lost 2 secondary reactors. We're pushing these ships beyond their breaking point." Vela looked at Jake, who was now connected to the ship's systems through multiple neural interface cables. His enhanced human cognitive abilities were the only thing standing between success and catastrophe, but the effort was clearly taking a physical toll. Blood trickled from his nose as his brain processed impossible amounts of data. "Captain Morrison, can you hold it together?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. Jake's response was strained but determined. "I'll hold it as long as it takes. Commander, those people down there are counting on us." The shuttles began their desperate dance between the planet's surface and the fleet. Each landing was a race against time, each launch a victory against impossible odds. But with every passing minute, the gravitational field became harder to maintain, and the price of Vela's earlier refusal to listen grew more painful. As the evacuation continued, Vela found herself thinking about human stubbornness, how Jake had refused to give up even when she had dismissed his warnings, how he was now literally burning out his enhanced brain to save people who weren't even his own species. It was a level of dedication that challenged everything she thought she knew about the young starfaring race. The clock continued to tick down, and the fate of thousands hung in the balance of one human's determination to prove that sometimes the painful price of refusing good advice can still be overcome by those willing to sacrifice everything to make things right. 8 minutes into the continuous shuttle rotation, Jake collapsed at his console. Blood streamed from his nose and ears as his neural implants overloaded from the massive data processing requirements. Vela rushed to his side, catching him as he fell. "Medical team to the bridge," she commanded, but Jake grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "No time," he gasped. "The field is destabilizing. Someone needs to take over the calculations." His eyes, bloodshot from the neural strain, focused on her with desperate intensity. "Commander, you have to let me finish this." Vela felt the weight of command and the burden of her earlier mistakes crushing down on her. Around them, the bridge crew watched in tense silence as their savior, the human she had dismissed and insulted, literally sacrificed his mind to save people he had never met. "There has to be another way," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't true. Jake's enhanced neural processing was the only thing maintaining the delicate balance of 6 ships' engine outputs. Without him, the gravitational field would collapse, and the shuttle's still planet-side would be trapped. "Let me up," Jake whispered, struggling to return to his console. 3 more minutes, that's all I need. 3 more minutes and the last shuttles will be clear." Vela helped him back to his position, watching in horrified admiration as he reconnected the neural interface cables to his skull. The moment the connections engaged, Jake's body convulsed as massive amounts of data flowed through his enhanced brain. But somehow, impossibly, he maintained control. The gravitational field stabilized once more, giving the evacuation shuttles the stable environment they needed for their final approaches. On the planet's surface, Chief Roberts coordinated the loading of the last group of refugees, a mixed group of families from the most remote mining station, including the young Tyrillian child who had clung to Jake earlier. "Final shuttle group launching in 90 seconds, Roberts reported. "All sites now clear of personnel." But 90 seconds felt like an eternity as Jake fought to maintain consciousness and control. The neural feedback was literally burning out. His enhanced cognitive implants, and Vela could smell the acrid scent of overheating bioelectronics. The human was dying to save people who were strangers to him, and she was powerless to help. 60 seconds to final shuttle launch, came the report from the surface. Jake's hands moved across his console with mechanical precision, his enhanced reflexes operating on pure instinct, as his conscious mind began to shut down from the neural overload. Vela realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, a human being transcending his own biological limitations through sheer force of will. 30 seconds. The gravitational field fluctuated dangerously as Jake's neural implants began to fail one by one. Warning alarms sounded across the bridge as the delicate balance of forces that held the field together started to collapse. But somehow Jake held on, his body trembling with the effort of maintaining control over systems that were beyond any single being's ability to manage. "Final shuttle clear of planetary atmosphere," came the triumphant report from the surface. The moment those words were spoken, Jake collapsed completely. his neural implants finally succumbing to the massive overload. The gravitational field dissipated instantly, and the dying star's chaotic forces once again dominated the space around the planet. But it no longer mattered. Every single colonist was safely aboard the evacuation fleet. Vela knelt beside Jake's unconscious form as the medical team finally arrived. Dr. Cora, the ship's chief medical officer, quickly assessed his condition with a handheld scanner. Severe neural trauma, Cora reported grimly. Multiple implant failures, significant brain swelling. Commander, I'm not sure he's going to survive this. Around the bridge, the crew stood in stunned silence. They had just witnessed something that would be talked about for generations. A human being sacrificing everything to save thousands of lives, including the lives of species that weren't his own. Status of all vessels, Vela commanded, her voice thick with emotion. All 6 ships operational, though several will require extensive repairs, Dex reported. Total civilian evacuation count, 12,847 souls safely aboard the fleet. 0 casualties during the evacuation operation. 0 casualties. Jake had achieved the impossible. A perfect evacuation under the most challenging conditions imaginable. And the price he had paid for that success was potentially his own life. As the medical team prepared to transport Jake to the ship's medical bay, Vela made a decision that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. She activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is Commander Vela. Today, we witnessed something extraordinary. A human being, Captain Jake Morrison, risked everything to save lives that weren't his responsibility. People who weren't his species, in a situation that was created by my own poor judgment. Her voice carried throughout the ship, reaching the ears of thousands of refugees who owed their lives to one man's sacrifice. Let this be a lesson to all of us about the danger of prejudice and the value of listening to wisdom, regardless of its source. Captain Morrison's actions today exemplify the very best of what we can be when we put aside our differences and work together. But even as she spoke the words, Vela wondered if Jake would live to hear them. The painful price of her refusal to listen had been paid not by her, but by the very person who had tried to save them all from the beginning. 3 days later, Jake finally regained consciousness in the medical bay. His vision was blurry, and his head felt like it had been split open with a mining laser, but he was alive. The first thing he saw was Commander Vela sitting beside his bed, her crystalline features reflecting the soft medical bay lighting. "How many?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "All of them," Vela replied, her harmonic voice unusually gentle. "Every single colonist made it off the planet. 12,147 souls are alive because of what you did." Jake closed his eyes, relief washing over him. The planet? Gone. The star collapsed completely 6 hours after the final shuttle cleared the atmosphere. The entire system is now a debris field surrounding a black hole. Vela paused, studying his face. "Captain Morrison, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Jake tried to sit up, but found his coordination was severely impaired. Dr. Cora appeared at his bedside, her scanner, already analyzing his neural activity. "The damage to your implants is extensive," she explained. "We've managed to remove most of the burnt-out components, but your enhanced cognitive abilities are gone. Your brain will heal, but you'll never again be able to interface directly with ship systems the way you did during the evacuation." Jake nodded slowly, having expected as much. The price of saving those lives had been his own enhanced capabilities, the very abilities that had made the rescue possible in the first place. It was a fair trade in his mind. "There's something else," Vela continued. "The Galactic Council has reviewed the incident reports. They're recommending you for the Stellar Cross, the highest honor that can be awarded to a member of any spacefaring species. You'll be the first human to receive it." "That's not necessary," Jake began, but Vela held up one of her 4 hands to stop him. "It's already decided. But more importantly, the Council has also issued new directives regarding interspecies cooperation and the value of diverse perspectives in crisis situations. What happened here will become a case study taught in military academies across the galaxy." Jake smiled weakly. "So maybe some good came out of my stubbornness after all." "Your stubbornness?" Vela's crest flared in surprise. "Captain Morrison, you showed incredible wisdom and patience, It was my arrogance and prejudice that nearly cost thousands of lives. You refused to give up on those people, even when I refused to listen to your warnings." Over the following days, as Jake recovered and the refugee fleet made its way to resettlement worlds, word of the evacuation spread throughout the galaxy. The story became known as The Human's Last Stand, a tale of one man's determination to save lives regardless of species, politics, or personal cost. Chief Roberts visited Jake several times during his recovery. "You know," the mining engineer said during one visit, "that little Tyrillian girl keeps asking about the nice man who helped her family. She drew you a picture." He handed Jake a crude but heartfelt drawing showing a stick figure in a uniform standing next to a spaceship, with dozens of smaller figures safely inside. Jake treasured that drawing more than any medal or commendation he would ever receive. Months later, at the Stellar Cross ceremony on the neutral world of Haven Station, Jake stood before representatives of dozens of species. His neural implants had been replaced with standard models, and he would never again possess the enhanced abilities that had made the rescue possible. But he had gained something far more valuable, the respect and friendship of beings from across the galaxy. Commander Vela herself presented the medal, her words carrying to every corner of the Great Assembly Hall. "Let this ceremony remind us all that wisdom comes in many forms, from many species, and often from the most unexpected sources. The human who stands before us today teaches us that the greatest strength lies not in refusing to listen, but in having the courage to act when others will not." As Jake accepted the medal, he thought about the painful price that had been paid for the lesson. Not just his own sacrifice, but the near catastrophe that had resulted from prejudice and closed minds. The real victory wasn't in the medal or the ceremony. It was in the knowledge that future crises might be handled differently, with more cooperation and less arrogance. In the months that followed, Jake returned to regular service with the human fleet, but his reputation preceded him. Whenever there was a crisis requiring interspecies cooperation, whenever commanders needed someone who could bridge the gap between different cultures and ways of thinking, Jake Morrison was the one they called. He never again possessed the enhanced neural capabilities that had made the Kepler evacuation possible, but he had gained something perhaps more valuable, the absolute trust of his peers and the knowledge that sometimes the most important victories come not from being right, but from refusing to give up on being heard. The painful price of Commander Vela's initial refusal had been paid, but from that pain had come wisdom, cooperation, and a new understanding between species that would save countless lives in the years to come. And sometimes that's the most any of us can hope for, that our mistakes become the foundation for someone else's wisdom. Jake kept the Tyrillian child's drawing on his desk for the rest of his career, a reminder that the greatest victories are measured not in personal glory, but in the lives we save and the bridges we build between the stars.